This is Chapter 8, Part 2 of our Political Parties lecture. The next section we're looking at is the party in government. The party that controls the most government offices and branches will have the most influence in public policy. So in other words, they get to determine who gets what, where, when, and how. Individuals and groups form coalitions to support parties based on the party's performance in office. That is what has been done and what the party promises to do. Most presidents fail to live up to their campaign promises, such as by raising taxes when they promised not to, or failing to cut taxes when they said they would. But they do accomplish some of their stated goals. Ronald Reagan, for example, promised to increase defense spending and cut social welfare expenditures, and he did both of those things. Barack Obama got troops out of Iraq as promised. Party platforms serve as a blueprint for legislative plans and reflect the attitudes of the party's base. The United States has a two-party system. Most other democratic countries have more than two parties and have a parliamentary system. However, throughout American history, one party has been the dominant major party for long periods of time, and then usually that's followed by the other party. Political scientists study these party eras. Each one starts with a critical election in which an old party coalition fracture and new ones begin to form. Voters realign their preferences and the other party dominates until a new party realignment occurs. Party realignments don't occur often, and they are usually sparked in response to some great crisis, such as the Great Depression. And you can see these different party eras listed here. It'd be really interesting to note with the fractioning going on within the Republican Party with the Donald Trump presidential candidacy, whether or not this will lead to a party realignment in the Republican Party. Here are some tables that I believe are in your book. We're going to take a closer look at them. Although few people actually read party platforms, they are one of the best written sources for what the parties believe in. A brief summary of some of the contrasting positions in the Democratic and Republican platforms of 2012 illustrate major differences in beliefs in the parties. Now, these are excerpts from 2012. They were updated in the 2016 election, and you can see those on the party websites. A few other areas from the party platforms of 2012 that you can compare. Examine some of the party system history. The framers of the Constitution didn't anticipate the advent of parties. James Madison had warned against the evils of faction, which we would call political parties today, but they formed almost immediately. The Federalist Party was the first to form when Secretary of State Alexander Hamilton was seeking support for starting a national bank. The Federalist Party drew support from capitalists and those who favored a stronger national government. An opposition party coalesced around Thomas Jefferson, comprising agrarian interests who favored stronger state government and weaker national control. After Jefferson defeated Federalist John Adams in the presidential election of 1800, the Federalist Party fizzled and kind of went away. The ideas of loyal opposition and rotation of power, however, were not yet established. The Democratic-Republican Party disintegrated due to the rise of internal faction shortly thereafter and was replaced with the beginnings of modern political parties. Andrew Jackson is considered to be the founder of the modern American political party because he created a new coalition of Westerners, Southerners, and propertyless white men who emerged from the old Democratic-Republican Party and formed the antecedent to the modern Democratic Party. One of Jackson's goals was to expand suffrage by eliminating property requirements for voting. Martin Van Buren, who succeeded Jackson as president, theorized that one party could not please everyone and needed loyal opposition to represent other segments. This came initially in the form of the short-lived Whig Party. Slavery dominated political discourse by the 1850s and split both parties internally. Abraham Lincoln formed an anti-slavery coalition that emerged as the Republican Party. After the Civil War, the Republican Party enjoyed 60 years of dominance. This was the second party realignment, and it lasted until the Great Depression. In the presidential election of 1896, the Democratic Party, still dominant in the South and making inroads in the West, nominated a populist candidate who vowed to throw out the gold standard and devalue money so that poor farmers could pay their debts with free silver. The ensuing Republican victory established new coalitions and entrenched the Republicans for another generation. President Hoover's poor handling of the Great Depression caused him to lose the 1932 presidential election to Franklin D. Roosevelt, who promised Americans a New Deal and forged a new coalition made up of urban dwellers, labor unions, Catholics and Jews, the poor, Southerners, and African Americans. The New Deal coalition kept the Democrats in power until the 1960s, when President Lyndon Johnson's Vietnam War and civil rights policies fractured it. This is an example of a campaign poster for FDR. Franklin Roosevelt reshaped the Democratic Party, bringing together a diverse array of groups that had long been marginalized in American political life. Many of the key features of the Democratic Party today, such as support from labor unions, can be traced back to the FDR era. This figure demonstrates the party coalitions today. The two parties continue to draw support from very different social groups, many of which have existed since the New Deal era. This figure shows the percentage identifying as Democrats and Republicans for various groups in 2012. And so I think it's very interesting when you look at who falls in which group. When Nixon was running for president in 1968, he formulated a policy platform emphasizing support for states' rights, law and order, and a strong military posture. The platform was calculated to win over Southern Democrats to the Republican Party. Southern whites have been defecting to the Republicans ever since the Democrats first began to embrace civil rights in 1948, and Nixon's states' rights was code for opposition to civil rights for many of these people. One of the most significant political changes over the past 4 decades has been the partisan realignment in the southern states that has transformed this region from a solid Democratic base of support to a solid Republican area. Without strong southern support for the Republicans in recent elections, it is doubtful that the GOP would have been able to attain majority party status in the Congress for the majority of the period from 1995 to 2014. The crucial role of the South in Republican politics has lately been reflected in the makeup of the GOP congressional leadership. Mitch McConnell of Kentucky and Trent Lott of Mississippi have served as Republican leaders in the Senate. Georgia's Newt Gingrich served as Speaker of the House for 3 terms, and Virginia's Eric Cantor currently holds the position of House Majority Leader, and then that was followed by Paul Ryan. Now, Paul Ryan, they said currently because that's when your book was published, but currently it's Paul Ryan. Now, granted, he is not from the South, but the South has literally led the leadership in the Republican Party over the last 2 decades. Unlike in previous realignments, Nixon's party didn't have both houses of Congress. This wasn't an exception, but the emergence of a new pattern that held for President Ronald Reagan and George Bush. Divided government and gridlock are now business as usual. Instead of party realignments, which are now seeing de-alignment, which means people are leaving the parties, which voters are gradually moving away, as I said, what are the implications of de-alignment for the political party system? A lot of people are moving away from being a Democrat or Republican and are becoming independents. Although 2 parties dominate American politics, third parties do exist, and occasionally they even briefly capture the public's attention. There are 3 types of third parties. One type, a cause party, promotes a cause, such as the Prohibition Party that formed over the single issue of outlawing alcoholic beverages. Some cause parties take extreme ideological positions. The Green Party would be an example of that. Another type of third party is an offshoot of a major party. In 1912, for example, Theodore Roosevelt, who had previously been elected as a Republican, ran under the Progressive Party banner. Sometimes parties form around a candidate, such as Ross Perot in 1992, who chooses not to affiliate with a party in the hopes of appealing to voters who are dissatisfied with both parties. So that was Ross Perot in 1992. Third-party candidates almost never win office, but they can split the major party vote and affect the outcome of an election, as in 1912 when the Progressives split with the Republican vote and enabled a Democrat to win in a Republican era. Third-party candidates usually struggle to get noticed in the United States, as almost all major elected officials are affiliated with either the Democrats or Republicans, but occasionally a third-party candidate will become a serious contender, as Lincoln Chafee did when he ran successfully for governor of Rhode Island in 2010. Today, multi-party systems are considered essential to democratic government. The absence of the free competition of parties is a feature of totalitarian regimes. Yet the founders were leery of parties and sought to limit the role they could play in American democracy. What role should they play? Should parties continue to be so loosely organized? There's only a limited connection between what candidates say they'll do and what they accomplish once in office. Advocates of what we call a responsible party model would like to see each party present a distinct, comprehensive governing program. Each candidate should then be committed to the program. The major party must implement its programs and accept responsibility for its performance. According to this model, parties should be more cohesive and accept collective responsibility for their actions so voters would know who to blame. This model, however, is far from reality today. Politicians face no sanctions for deviating from the party line, and party leadership has no control over them. Southern Democrats are often more conservative and serve more conservative constituencies than Northern ones, and regularly defect from their party on social issues. In Congress, some of these defectors are organized into a group called Blue Dog Democrats. Such behavior is unusual in most other democracies, where party leadership has much more power to enforce party unity in voting. What do you think? Should we be adopting the responsible party model? During the presidency of George W. Bush, there was much discussion in the press about heightened partisan tensions between Democrats and Republicans in Congress. While it is true that congressional voting was more polarized along party lines than it had usually been the case in recent times, a close look at the roll calls on 9 key proposals that President Bush favored reveals a variety of patterns. On 3 issues, colored in orange in this table, there was bipartisan support for Bush's position. On 2 others, colored in blue, the majority of Democrats supported Bush's proposals, whereas the majority of Republicans decided to not go along with their own party's leader. Just 4 of the 9 key votes, colored in green, fit the very loosely America criteria for party line vote: a majority of the president's party voting in support of his position, and a majority of the opposition party voting the other way. Notably, all these partisan votes, at least some Democrats broke ranks to support President Bush, and on the Republican side, there was unanimity only on the issue of cutting taxes in 2001. America's lack of strong party discipline limits the scope of government because one party usually cannot gain enough votes to make major legislative changes. Healthcare provides a good example. Most European countries enacted universal healthcare laws after World War II, but Democratic President Bill Clinton, with a Congress controlled by Democrats, wasn't able to get enough votes from his own party to implement universal healthcare in the United States. On the other hand, it's also hard for parties to cut government spending. Politicians are out to get more for their own constituents, and there's really nobody with an incentive to say no. So it's a complicated system, but our 2-party system is what we have, and so far it has effectively, for the most part, run our government. This concludes Chapter 8.